Welcome to BIA, Canada's top black media provider. Whether you're looking for shows on fashion, art, music, or simple lifestyle, we bring you the best content the black community in Canada has to offer and so much more. And better yet, do you have an idea for a project you'd like us to help you with? We provide equipment, studio, and office space, as well as a team of dedicated individuals to help you bring those ideas to life. So don't wait. Check out our new website at biamedia.ca for more information on how to contact us and start creating today. BIA Media, your way.
What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also host the only online conversation in the world for dads and fathers that's co-sponsored by Dove Men Care, and also by DAD, Central Canada's National Fatherhood Organization. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And we are broadcasting live today on April 24th, broadcasting here from Toronto. Everyone else is in different locations, but it is a beautiful day in Toronto. We haven't had too many days of back-to-back good weather this spring, but we're taking advantage of what we got today. As always, Sunday afternoons around 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we do this thing called Black Canada Talking. It's an online event that provides Black Canadians the opportunity to give their takes and POVs on stories that are of importance to them. Every other week, we do our panel roundtable, and we are blessed and highly favored today to have three people who are smarter than me with me today. First up, we've got Elle Jones. What is up, Elle Jones?
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
Outstanding. How are you doing?
I'm good. I was hiking today, but it's not nice out here. It was actually extremely windy, but yeah.
Well, how's the temperature going on out there?
Today was bad. Like, we're always just kind of, it's spring, it's Halifax, so wait 5 minutes, the weather will change.
It's spring and so what have you been doing with yourself lately since we last chatted? What's been going on?
We're at the end of the semester, so, we're into marking and exams and stuff. I do have a summer course, so I'm not done. That's about it at work. I'm still training for this race. I have a race at the end of May, so, heavy into training for that, like the Cabot Trail relays. And yeah, just living life.
Well, if I ever make it out to the East Coast, maybe you can become my trainer.
Yeah, well, aren't you making it out for the summit?
We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. But if we do get out there, maybe I don't know if I'll bring my runners out there because you'll shame me. You'll shame me if I bring my runners out there.
I will. I'm not gonna. I'm fast. I'm relatively fast.
Good stuff. As always, it's great to have you. Next up, we have Cesar Nadiva Musa. What is up, Cesar? Is Cesar with us?
We lost Cesar.
Okay, well, let's see if...
He
is with us. Okay, Cesar, what's going on? How are you, man?
I'm good. Hi, Brother Vibe. Hi, Sister Elle. No, I'm good. We can't wait for real spring, or maybe should I say summer, to be here.
Yeah.
Amid so many things going on, talks about some third world war, but also, and more importantly, I should say, inflation and the price of goods. And of course, we still continue our good work. A little shout out to some of my mentees. I'm thinking especially of one coming from a Black family that dealt with drugs, violence, incarceration, a lot of very much like a book script. And he's rising and probably getting his first career job, moving back to good environment. So it takes years of work, but you know, and I don't take the sole credit, but this is a reminder to our community not to give up on our youth. And it can take years of work, but it can absolutely be worth it to create the young women and men, adults of the future our community needs.
Wonderfully said. And just to add on before we get Roger with this, I was having a conversation live on Friday with a gentleman who has a Black research firm and has done work with organizations like the World Health Organization. Of course, he can't get anyone from this country to pay attention to him who's Black, but he said a very interesting fact that the average age of a Canadian is around 46 years old, but the average age of a Black Canadian is 29 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the very many interesting facts. And I'm having this gentleman come on the next few weeks because the amount of data that he has about us is crazy. But for some reason, Black organizations don't want to pay him any mind in this country. But that's a whole other conversation. Next up, Roger Dundas, co-founder, publisher of BuyBlacks.com, Canada's #1 online magazine. What's going on, Roger?
Ouch, so much going on. It's year-end work.
Yes.
So unlike Elle, I'm not going hiking yet, not quite yet. I'll get there. Hopefully this weekend we can get some outside activities going on and some cycling and stuff. Get the bicycles all tuned up.
Good. Family is good.
Yeah, the family's wonderful, man. Wonderful. They're amazing.
Or as you always say to me, they're better than you.
Much better.
Okay.
I'm the one getting up at 6 a.m. while everybody's sleeping until 8, 9 o'clock. I mean, something is wrong. We all go to bed at the same time.
Well, good stuff. Thanks for being with us. Well, folks, we're just going to go right in it today. So many people may not know, but there was an article put out on the Medium platform about the Black North Initiative. And if our producer can put it up on the screen, we're going to spend the first part of our conversation, people giving their takes on everyone has somewhat looked at the article who was on the screen here. I'd like to get everyone's takes on it. The article is called Winter is Coming, the Peril of the Black North. And let's just put it this way, folks. It's not complimentary of the Black North Initiative. So I thought it'd be great to start off today's conversation. I know everyone is taking a look at the article. I'd just like to get your thoughts on it. And Black North Initiative is one of the many organizations that serviced in the last 2.5, 3 years, claiming to want to help Black Canadians. I'll leave it at that. Who wants to jump in first? Go ahead, Elle.
I want to go. But I think the first thing to say is that the issues that this article addressing, while it is critical of BNI, and I have been critical of BNI publicly as well, I do think it's important to say that the critique also has to land on government and the state, right? So in many ways, this is representative of a certain state of affairs in Black Canada, both historically and particularly post-2020, that does not solely rest with BNI. And I think we would be mistaken to only single out BNI and say, these people are doing this as though it solely rests in one person or one organization. So what I mean here is, of course, and I have sitting on my desk right beside me, so I'm all citing it, Rocky Jones Revolutionary, which is the autobiography of Rocky Jones. And in that, he speaks about BUF, for example, Black United Front, which was an organization formed in Nova Scotia in the late 60s, particularly in response to the destruction of Africville, where Black people realized that we did not have the political power to stop that from happening, and that clearly we needed to organize across communities, right? So we have this big Black family meeting, and people decide we're going to create this organ. And that is immediately co-opted by government. So the minute we're talking about 1968, this is the same year as the Congress of Writers and Artists in Montreal. This is a great year of mobilization across the globe and in Black Canada. And then, you have Black people on the ground mobilizing to create a political organ for us. And the government responds by throwing money at, conservative Black organizations, investing in gatekeeping, creating their own organizations to effectively crush a grassroots movement. So this is historical. Throughout our history, whenever Black people hit the streets and start moving and start agitating, and we all collectively start having a consciousness towards, our injustice and race that's being shared, there's always a response by the state to select out groups or people or whatever it is they need to do to essentially repress that. And we've been particularly seeing this happen since, of course, the BLM era, whatever you want to call it, the era of the movement of Black lives. So one thing I think it would be unfair to BNI to say, like, as if this is the only thing that represents that, right? This is happening across the board. And the term for it is racial capitalism, which is a term from at least the 1970s onwards, which is the idea that capitalism will always use race. Like, we've always been tied to capitalism, right? The development of racism and capitalism are hand in hand. Slavery funds the development of the so-called developed world, right? So there is no slavery outside of capitalism. It's the theft of Black labor to build up the capitalist system. And of course, like, within that, you see how when convenient, the elite or the powers that be will use race and racial division for their own ends, right? So an example of racial capitalism is like universities will put like their one Black student on their website and like make it look like they're diverse. And there's actually been lawsuits won by Black students when they were like photoshopped into these pictures, being like, I was not in this thing at all. Like, you can't do this. So that's an example of racial capitalism, where institutions that are powerful will use Black people or other racialized people in order to make themselves appear progressive or inclusive or whatever, but it's about them, it's not about us. So it's never about the well-being of the Black person, the uplift of the Black community, our economic well-being. It's about power protecting itself. So what's being identified, and I know this is a long intro, but I do think this is important to say. I'm sorry, guys, I'm giving you like a lecture.
No, we're fine.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Keep
going, man.
My point is, so this article is identifying BNI particularly as saying, that this isn't really about a collectivity kind of like effective movement for Black people. This is about one man. And as it says in the article, like his particular individual gain and what he calls ego, right? The idea that this is actually about an individual and isn't effective in addressing the problems. But B, and the part of the article I obviously have more of an issue with, is that he attributes this to what he calls wokeness, right? And we're seeing a lot of this, like this industry of kind of anti-wokeness, where everything's like, oh, the woke. But it's an ill-defined term. Like, what do you mean by the woke? It means everything from, trans people to political Black people to like the Democratic Party. Like, it's not a well-defined term. And people tend to use it to mean anything I don't like politically becomes woke. So my point of all this intro was to say, this isn't wokeness. This is racial capitalism and neoliberalism. Like, we've been critiquing this for like 50 years. This isn't woke. There is nothing woke about Bay Street. Nobody ever claimed Bay Street was woke. Young Black activists wearing BLM shirts or whatever you're, calling woke are not promoting Bay Street. Like, so, in this attempt to kind of lump this in with a particular conservative critique of wokeness, he cites McWhorter and Sowell, who are like conservative Black figures, who have a critique in general of the kind of idea of speaking about racism and anti-Blackness, which, they claim is really just an elite project that falsely manufactures a kind. I'm giving this isn't a very nuanced discussion, but this idea that like, people see racism where there is none, people are just invested in talking about racism in these particular ways for their own ends. Without a critique of power or capitalism within that, right? So he's calling this wokeness. And like, BNI is not about wokeness. And this is where I'm like, I really have an issue, is in all of this article, he cites the Globe and Mail reporting, for example, that revealed that nobody who signed the pledge met their demands. So the pledge is like, you need to have 3% of your board needs to be Black. And Globe does a very simple investigation where they like contact the companies that signed the pledge and like, how much progress have you made on diversity? And nobody's made any progress. Like, people sign the pledge and then nothing happens. But the Globe and Mail actually cites reporting that Desmond Cole and I did months before. So almost a year ago now, Desmond Cole and I wrote 2 public articles critiquing BNI. And when we did this, we got, as usual, a huge amount of backlash for being hateful, for burning down the community, for not being unifying. And our critique was exactly this. So a year ago, we made the critique that this is not about serving the needs of Black people. In our first article, we talk about how they accepted a huge $1 million donation from Prem Watsa, who's also on the original founding group of BNI. And he is the largest investor in predatory bail bonds in the US. This is the bail bond industry that extracts like hundreds of millions of dollars a year from poor Black people and communities, predatory bail bonds. So like setting bail at, $500,000. Like Khalif Browder is an example of this, right? Where Black people are sent to jail. There's impossible bail bonds. You go in.
Okay, Elle has frozen.
The prison complex. And Prem Watts has been facing a campaign for years from the ACLU in particular on Color of Change to divest. That money is invested and given as a gift to Black North Initiative. So in our first article, we just asked a simple question. How can you claim to be fighting for Black people, including Black justice, while you're invested in the most harmful industry to Black people? And our second article looked at who signed the pledge. And we pointed out there was a bunch of like oil companies, mining companies, companies that are doing damage across the globe to Black people, killing Black people, displacing Black people. And we asked that question is, how are you going to take this capitalist money where Wes Hall has done all his life work, has been in this industry, ask like Enbridge to sign this pledge as they literally kill Indigenous people in Canada and criminalize them, as, you know, these people are in Africa, in Ghana, in mines, killing people. And we think that that is going to bring us Black uplift. And my point is, Desmond and I are probably what this person would describe as woke, right? We talk about anti-Black racism. We talk about defunding the police. And we made this critique long before he was able to make it and before anybody else would make it publicly, because of our work within community, because we know what organizing looks like, because we've experienced the way the government will shut you down and the state will shut you down, because we have a historical knowledge. So all of that wokeness is what allowed us to see this long before he was seeing it. So I take real issue with this article sort of being like, oh, the woke. I'm like, this is not woke. This is capitalism. And the last thing I'll say is BNI has always been about Bay Street. That is not a secret. You know, like Wes Hall talked about how he's worked on Bay Street his entire life, how he never spoke about racism. The man's a Jehovah's Witness, so he can't even protest himself, which he said publicly. And then, you know, along comes 2020. And as with many people, people took advantage of that moment, often not to fight for the lives of Black people living in prison, not to fight for the poorest of us, not to fight for those of us disenfranchised, but to get more positions for the elite. And this is not only BNI that this has happened with. We've seen this in universities. We've seen this across government, that the people who have benefited the most from post-2020 have not been the people who actually get shot by police, which is Black people living in poverty. It's been elite Black people. And we have been making this critique for a long time. And to move it away from BNI, the final thing I'll say is I really do think that the heart of this is talking about how post-2020, we started talking about justice, policing, all of that, and we ended up with a lot of stuff about business. I have nothing against business and like Black economic self-determination, but I've just been saying, when did we shift? Like, when did we consent to shifting from talking about the most vulnerable in our communities to talking about home ownership for middle-class families, right? Like, both are necessary, but we have made choices to sort of leave behind the people who actually, whose bodies started this movement in the first place. And that is what I'm critical of. And you cannot make that critique without also acknowledging anti-Blackness. So this article wants to critique places like BNI and then also say that talking about anti-Blackness is, you know, not really real. And, you know, this is just kind of a scam. And the more we all stop talking about race, the better. And I'm like, but that, yeah, like that's part of the critique doesn't add up. So I've now talked for about 20 minutes. Welcome to my TED Talk. I will stop. Everybody else can talk. But obviously I have thoughts about this. And I feel like having done this reporting a year ago, I get to claim reporting privilege and say, I told you so. I told you so. So stop getting in my inbox and threatening me when I tell you things, because a year later, everybody will say that I'm right. So thank you. Apologies.
Wow.
Jones. Please don't hold back. I want you to tell us exactly how you feel. I feel like you've left something out.
Well, so just we got an echoing here, but just to be fair, producer, can you just put up those two articles quickly that Elle is referring to before we get on to Roger and Cesar? So if you can put the articles up that Elle is referring to, there's one right there. And then there's the second one. So both those were done almost over a year ago, Elle?
Yeah, last year in May. I think it's May 6th and May 2012.
Well,
or something.
May 12th. All right. So if you just put up the other article again, so people, you can reference those articles, the titles are there.
I mean, the last thing I'll say is also, it's interesting that once Globe and Mail said something, people felt they could, because like white people were saying it. Well, one of the authors isn't white, but you know, like a white mainstream organ was saying it. But when Black people say it, it's illegitimate. And that tells you a lot about how our community will say we want to need Black media. But then when you have Black reporters, people don't want to take it seriously until white people say it. As you know too, Dr. Vibe, you know?
Okay.
Tell me about it.
Go out. Well, who wants to jump in after Elle's TED Talk? Cesar, Roger.
Go ahead, brother Roger. Go ahead. You're
Elle, there's some real critical points that you made there about the especially about the organizations that are supporting it and the damage that they've been doing to the Black community. I'm going to take a different approach to it, right? I'm going to take a completely different approach. And the reason why is because I read the article in full, and I was like, whoa, wow, he really decimated this guy. I mean, it's like he really had a bee in his bonnet for Wes. I don't know Wes personally. I've never even had a conversation or an email with him, which is strange because we are byblacks.com, and you'd imagine at some point we would connect with different leaders from different nonprofit organizations. But that's for another conversation, right? So what I like to get into is the objective of the organization. I gotta say the objective might be somewhat honorable. You know, I choosing my words very carefully. Might be somewhat. When I look at the playbook, right, and the playbook talks about creating equitable development opportunities for retention and promotion, you know, building pipeline and equitable hiring process and eradicate, you know, racial compensation gaps, blah, 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 right? But, you know, in the previous conversation where I was on this call, I told you about the recruiting challenges where you're not really getting Black people in those spaces anyway, because it gets shut down right from the recruiter, right? So, you know, it's honorable that you have this pledge and everything, but if you already have a system that is really just stoked in anti-Black racism, then the gatekeeper is already there to protect that system. So, you know, the CEO could go and sign whatever they want to sign, but it's not going to change because one man or one signature doesn't do it. And it's not just the BNI. I've seen it in other industries as well. I think where Ian is working with BDRB, breaking down racial barriers in the music industry. I mean, it's hard to eliminate racism in a music industry that most of the venues and spaces and contracts are owned by white people. You know, it's, you know, how are you going to get an upcoming artist on the stage? But coming back to BNI. So I made a few notes. There's a few notes. And something happened recently. I got to say, it was a very interesting thing. But first of all, I don't even know what BNI's connection is with the Black community because I don't see them in what I would call traditional spaces where conversations are happening. And to your point, in the grassroots community. So I consider myself a grassroots person. I'm not an elite. I don't consider myself one of the elite because I don't get invited to certain spaces. So Elle, you and I we're on the deny list. We don't use the term, delisted, any of that. We're on the deny list, right? So we need to get on the allow list. Sure, that's how that's going to happen. So that was my first observation, just from a looking on perspective. You know, how is it integrated with the community? What organizations are they working with? I believe they're working with the BBPA. I believe so, but I don't know much more about who else they're working with. I don't know. Right? As I said, I've never had a conversation with a man. What I do know though is that BNI has never advertised on byblacks.com. So in everything that you're doing and everything that you're connecting with the Black community, you don't feel like advertising with the top ranked online magazine for Black Canadians is where you should put any type of promotional dollars for anything that any workshop or anything that you're doing. And I scour Black media, and I don't think I've seen any type of advertising in any Black media either. I'm just saying, right? So that's something I can say for sure. It's never happened. The other thing too is that when they pitched us stories, the stories came from white publicists.
Wow.
Let's just stop there. Let's just let that marinate. It's not the first time. I mean, it's okay. I think a Black organization can use whoever they want to hire. But when the messaging is really core to, advancing some type of Black cause, you'd figure that you'd find somebody who is very intimate and understands the nuances of the Black struggle, which would mean use any one of the 15 or more publicity firms that are run by Black people in Canada. There's more than that. Ed, I think there are more solopreneurs, but there are a ton of agencies, like established agencies, with very competent publicists. So that's just my little observation. The other thing too is that recently, I guess somebody sent me this email. I found it very humorous that Ben Mulroney was conducting some. I think he was going to do it. Correct.
Town hall. There's a new, banking or finance organization. Orchid is called, and I think he's a chief technical officer.
So he's gonna do the listening sessions with Black people.
Yes, and it's in collaboration with the Black North Initiative.
Now we did the
look at Elle's face.
Yeah, I think we did a little bit more digging, and I'm just gonna validate the digging that was done. So I am on the website. I'm just checking. There's a guy on the board called Mark Mulroney. I believe it's his brother. I believe so. So again, there's tons of competent, well-respected DEI consultants that I think could engage in this work and would get better responses from the Black community, and would be sensitive to the nuances of the Black community. But that's not what's happening, right? So, I mean, those are just my little observations of it. I won't even get into the whole West story because, as a friend, Ed and I, we were having dinner recently with another friend. And that friend, who will remain nameless, said that, you know what? I'm running an organization. I'm not putting my face on any goddamn billboard to promote it.
Well, also, he doesn't put Black people on his board.
I wasn't even going to mention the fact that of the 20 faces that I saw on this, 20 or so faces, I counted them. There were 5 for sure Black people, and there was one person I wasn't 100% sure.
And then if you look at Kingsdale, it's him, and the only other Black person, at least last time I looked when I was doing research when we were writing about it, was the lawyer, who isn't really technically supposed to be on a board anyway. So Wes, and this, sorry, I know I said I'd shut up, but like,
no, please.
The whole, and this sort of shows you the problem of saying 3% of a board, because that means like one Black person. So Wes can be on his own board. He's hitting more than hitting the target, right? Because it's like more than 3%, and he doesn't even have to hire another Black person. That's so incredible. This is kind of the problem with the whole thing.
But and again, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And as I said, when I look at the playbook for BNI, it is amazing if it was being done. If I felt like it was being done, I don't know if it is being done because I don't have any evidence to show that it is being done.
But it was written by white people.
The playbook. I'm talking about the playbook.
Yeah, the playbook was outsourced to a white firm.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so. So these are some of my observations. I'm just looking on, and I'm sharing some lived experience that I've had with the organization, right? So that's just kind of surface. I know for a fact too, and again, I can't really share the names, but I know that there was this meeting that happened just right when the pandemic started. And there was a conversation. There were some government officials there, and I believe Wes was there. And there was a person who remained nameless, but that person runs an arts organization. They were in the same room, and they were talking about, trying to get spaces for, Black community organizations. And Wes summarily just shut her down completely. So much so that that person, I believe, walked out of the meeting at that point. So that's that. I mean, I'm sure those types of things happen in different spaces and in different areas. And maybe he thought he was giving that person some good advice, but it wasn't received well. So these are the things. So to say, I mean, I'm not sure of the connection to the Black community. They don't advertise with buyblacks.com. They use white publicity firms to pitch to buy Blacks when they have stories. that want to come out. And then there's this whole fiasco with Ben Mulroney. I mean, it just screams of nepotism. Don't forget that Ben Mulroney's wife was the one that came after Sasha Exeter and then had to apologize.
And also, didn't Jessica Mulroney say a bunch of racist stuff?
That's his wife.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's his wife that can't. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it seems odd that Ben, is doing DEI work today. I don't know. I mean, maybe he always had that heart inside of him, but he didn't strike me as that type of person because I've met him.
Okay. Before we bring on Cesar, there's a comment here. Marlon Stevens says Kingsdale did not hire a lawyer until after he founded BNI. So I don't know if that is true or not, but Marlon's
hire the lawyer or appoint him on the board.
Didn't hire the lawyer until after he founded BNI. So Marlon is pretty wary of his stuff. So I'll leave it at that. Cesar, what you say?
No, thank you. So allow me first, I just want to state two things before starting. Number one, allow me, with respect to that article, well-written article, by the way, very much good Queen's English, if I can put it that way. Allow me to skip the BNI part. Sister Elle addressed it well. Absolutely, there are issues. We know the reality of being Black is that when you have a Black organization that is given so much preeminence in a country of white supremacy, you have to pay attention to the layers and the details and, address accountability in terms of really saying, is this organization really having an impact on Black people? Is it even really known by the average Black person? I will also skip addressing what is very evident in the article, and Brother Roger talked about it clearly. The writer, Perry C. Douglas, has a rather personal issue with Mr. West Hall that I think they need Iyanla or Oprah for a sit down, because clearly I was like, brothers beefing while talking about, let's end racism. The article reminded me of something that happened 2 years ago. And I'm putting myself in the story because very much this article, I'm assuming Perry C. Douglas is a Black man, is written from a conservative lens, is denouncing such a thing called wokeness as some new religion, guilting whites and infantilizing Blacks, which, by the way, reminds me of our brother, Professor Mark Lemont Hill, on his show. He had a show about that with a Black professor, but it reminded me of, I'm going to say 2 years ago after George Floyd, probably September 2020, a former brother I used to work with, notably promoting the dolls, the Black dolls him and his wife were making, turned his vest and was basically on a show in Montreal accusing me as a director on equity, diversity, and inclusivity, basically one of the people this article is criticizing. The brother was on a show accusing me of being a race hustler, one of those Black people making money out of the racism and this and that. That was on the show, and this show, online show, you could interact with the show in the chat. So I put a message there where I basically asked the show host to ask him to define what is white privilege. And I'm saying this because this article talks about that. And that brother, 2 years ago, just as this article fails to understand and explain white privilege. They don't understand it. They don't get it. Yes, without going too much into the ideology and rhetoric, first of all, I'm not about wokeness or woke culture. This is simply addressing racism with historical, socioeconomic, political, cultural, religious facts that have created the society that we live in. It is a reality that when you're white and poor, you have white privilege. Not because you're poor, you don't have privilege, but if you were black and poor, your fate would be worse. Just as you can be black, be well, from a good family, living in a good neighborhood, but guess what? That day you get pulled over by that angry white cop or that white cop who has any issue with you, and you can end up being the next George Floyd. It's as simple as that to define white privilege, and yet this article fails to do that. And it starts, there's so many issues in that article. Allow me to just point out a few because it is a long article. I mean, it says 21 minutes to read, but truly, for the average person, you will need more than 21 minutes because, like
You
I
have to
said,
go back.
exactly, you have to go back.
Reread it.
You need to Google it. You need to take some notes. But there are so many issues. First and foremost, the article does not start the best way because clearly the writer is stuck in the previous scientific narrative of survival of the fittest when science has shown that human survival is not about survival of the strongest, as the article implies, but adaptation and cooperation. Also, when the article really talks and promotes the notion that black people, you have to reject all this anti-racism talk, guilting white people, and then he quotes Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell, brilliant black economist with one major flaw. He's a black conservative who bashes only black people without addressing whites. He basically, that Martin Luther King speech about bootstraps, he addresses black people accountability without looking at the structure, the micro, macro, and very much the systemic issues that we have to deal with that basically make it that by default of being black, you will have certain challenges that are truthful to your reality. It is not a matter of your will. It is not a simple matter of you just working harder. Just look at what happened with Amazon. It is a brother who basically led the unionization of Amazon. I'm not saying a white person could have done it, but imagine how much harder it is to become unionized when you have a workplace that has more and more black people, just as we saw with COVID, who became disproportionately affected by COVID, just as when we talk about police brutality, who is disproportionately killed by police from Canada to Brazil. So many failures, many failures in that article, because notably when he talks about black people to end racism, to tackle systemic racism, it's not about this wokeness and Black North Initiative and West Hall, they're like, this is some emotional guilt trap against white people. We have to become entrepreneurs. And then he gives the example of Jewish, Asian communities. I'm sorry. Not everybody can be an entrepreneur. Not everybody should be an entrepreneur. It's not for everyone. Those other communities, because I also talk about Jewish communities, Chinese communities, as yes, they can do it. We black people can do it. You still need you social studies people. You still need your teachers. You still need you people who basically work in government. You build wealth, not by everybody starting a new entrepreneurship thing, but with black consciousness, black identity coming together, whether it is that the person is a janitor, a teacher, or a manager, or a CEO, or even a Mr. West Hall. So some of the issues that have been addressed in regards to Black North Initiative are very valid, but it takes a truthful and dedicated black consciousness to turn it into concrete actions, such as the brothers who are sitting behind me. And I purposefully hide Obama's face because Obama was not a Pan-African, but the three who are sitting there, along Marcus Garvey, along W.E.B. Du Bois, along Stockley Carmichael, along Fred Hampton, it starts with that black consciousness that this article absolutely fails, thinking that it gave a great example. The American billionaire Robert Smith paying off the debts of X amount of students to the price of, I think, 34 million as part of a larger $1 billion initiative. Where does that come from? If that doesn't come from black consciousness, it doesn't come from an understanding of history, socioeconomics, the impact of so many etc. things that impact the realities of black people, into the fact that, as I explain, the majority of black students, teenagers, they don't know who the richest black person is in this world. It's not because of a failure of understanding economics. It's not because of a lack of desire to become an entrepreneur, but because the black identity is stifled, not just in the schools, but even in the household, because of integration, because of very much even what this article does. A black conservative writing a long, targeted against BNI and Westall piece, which is very pleasing for a white conservative reader to read. This is beautiful. That's why, for example, he quotes Thomas Sowell. White conservatives love Thomas Sowell. Yes, Thomas Sowell did great, advocating for the black family, etc. Yes, but you can't just bash black people in terms of, at a macro level without addressing systemic issues in terms of ongoing, not just historical, ongoing oppression of white supremacist structures, as Elle was talking about the prison, as COVID has shown in terms of frontline workers, etc., as we see in terms of the differential treatment with Ukrainian refugees versus refugees who are brown or black. So the article is one that if someone wants to read it, you got to take your time. But my God, I could literally poke so many holes at it. And I'm not saying holes because the nature of my work is in equity, diversity, and inclusivity, but because the article is kind of a matter of lenses in terms of how it's flawed. And I give you a last example. Remember last year when we had elections, and we were here on this show, we had the Canadian elections, and my issue with black conservatives was not that they were conservative. If we really are honest, black people as a group are overall more conservative than they are liberal.
100%.
But absolutely. So my issue is not black conservative, therefore I have a problem with you. No, it's not because you're conservative. But in the Canadian elections of 2021, my number one issue with black conservative is how do you manage to be part of a political party and to vote for a man, Erin O'Toole, and maybe this year it will be Pierre Poilievre, who does not recognize systemic racism that impacts you directly with all proofs, documents, and facts. This is not a matter of denial. It's like imagining a Jewish person who will vote for a party that denies anti-Semitism. We can't even imagine that, but we have, just as this article, blacks who are conservative will deny systemic racism because of what? Because they've made it. It's very much hypocritical for me, and I cannot condone this article. Whatever issues he has with BNI and Mr. Westall, honestly, they need Oprah, they need Iyanla, they need what's his name, Jerry Springfield or whatever his name was. Springer. There you go.
I have some questions.
The red table. They need to come to the table.
The red table.
Oh no.
I mean, the interesting thing about the example of Jewish people as well is Jewish people are sort of being held up against us as this like successful community.
They got so much.
Jewish people talk about history all the time. Holocaust education is mandatory. We were talking about passing a law in Canada to make Holocaust denial a crime. Jewish people have all kind of Jewish organizations. So this idea that like you guys just want to like whine about anti-blackness and Jewish people, I'm like, Jewish people talk about anti-Semitism like all the time. The IHRA definition is like you can't even talk about Israel. So since when did Jewish people not know their Jewish identity, not advocate vigorously for that identity and their politics, and constantly advocate to government around their interests and particularly around anti-Semitism? Like, how is that? Like this idea that black people stop whining because you guys just want to talk about all this injustice, unlike Jewish people. Jewish people talk about historical injustice all the time. The Holocaust, which we should. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I'm just saying, like, why can Jewish people talk about the Holocaust and we can't talk about slavery?
And if I may add, two important points. Have black people gotten reparations for slavery and colonization? Because something like about 80 years after the Shoah, the Holocaust, Israel and Jewish people still get reparations from those nations such as Germany, France. The Jewish community in the United States is the most educated and richest minority in the world. It is not accidental that whether you are a Democrat or a Republican presidential candidate, you go to the Jewish Defamation League and the Jewish basically main organization to preach, to speak, to give speeches over there. Even as when you're Republican, it is known Jewish people vote 75 to 80% Democrat. Yet even the Republican candidate still goes over there to give speeches to AIPAC because of the power relations there. And another thing, how often do you have Black conservatives, people wanting to trash on addressing systemic racism, addressing Black organizations that are trying to combat racism, when they give the Jewish example? Are they there to talk about the fact that up to 1/3 of Jewish children, Israeli children, live under the poverty line? Do they address those systemic issues? Do they talk about the Hasidim population that's 90% living in poverty? They don't address those things. They actually fall into anti-Semitism of giving that powerful Jewish image of success in order to bash on Black people and say, you got to build yourself by the bootstraps. And as MLK said, but you're missing the whole picture. It's not just a matter of the individual will. It's systemic. So this article clearly fails to understand anti-racism, systemic anti-racism, whatever the issues with BNI and West Hall, that's personal for the writer, but truly, truly lots of problems in this article.
You know, there's something that the article touched on that I found interesting, because it made me think a little bit more. Let's dig a little deeper into this. So he said that, you know, Wes is on Dragon's Den, and most of the people who go on Dragon's Den are not Black. So therefore, by virtue of that, most of the companies that he's invested in not going to be Black. Let's go again to Kingsdale. Is that the name of his company? Right. So Kingsdale is investing primarily in companies that are not Black owned. So it begs the question: do white-owned companies or non-Black-owned companies make your investments more money, right? And therefore, is money or community the priority? Because one of the things I do agree with the playbook, not that it's being done. Remember, I said I don't know. I don't have any evidence that it's being executed. But you know, I'm a big believer in business and economics as the driver for freedom. Because when you have your own money, you can make your own decisions. When you don't have any money, you have to rely on somebody else, so you don't have the power. So it comes back to the power. So question, you know, is it that this person, who I've never met before, is investing in non-Black owned companies to make a profit to try and help the community, or is he just to help himself? Is it money or is it community?
Let's just not forget that, as my father told me, you can have all the money in the world. He gave the example of Mike Tyson. You can be rich and famous, but if you don't have your head at the right place and your heart, aka a sense of community and identity at the right place, all the money can disappear and you can find yourself poor and struggling.
Right.
When you don't have money, and even if you just have a little bit, having a sense of consciousness, the brain, a sense of identity, a sense of community, you will grow, you will prosper, and no matter how many times you fall, you will get back up.
The other thing I wanted to say was just transitioning into perhaps some other topics, but so one of the programs that BNI has been doing has been like the home ownership program, right? Which is this idea, like the truth that Black people, you know, have trouble with. We don't have the intergenerational wealth that allows us to accrue capital through home ownership. We can't make that investment because you can't afford it. And so much of our capital, of course, is tied up. You have the mortgage, you know, you property ownership, etc. Right? So that is correct. And BNI partnered for this program with loans. And of course, the question I've had about that is like, because you're supposed to get a bank loan and then BNI from some other sources like cobbles together, and then you get that loan and you pay back the bank loan first and then pay back BNI. I'm like, well, when are you going to get around to that? Because it takes like 30 years to pay off a mortgage. So I don't think BNI is going to be around in 30 years. And this isn't actually for me to bash on BNI. That's not the point. I'm moving through that to something else. So that we're not solely like bashing on Black people on a Black Canada Talks, I think what everybody is kind of perhaps missing in all of this discourse, woke, anti-woke, this person, this personality, this celebrity, is other solutions that exist for Black people and community. And I want to talk a little bit about something that Elle Jones is doing out here, which I think we should all think about as a non-government, non-bank, like not just, working within the system and saying we just need to be like white people. We need to use white people's banks. If we can get access to like white ways of capital, that will bring us success without thinking about how do we use our own communities. And this is land trusts. So Lynn Jones has successfully created, so Dr. Lynn Jones is Rocky Jones's sister, but let's not know her that way. She's also the first Black woman to be on the executive, elected to the executive of the union in Canada, the 100th Black candidate for the NDP federally. She was fighting against apartheid, was taken as an election observer into South Africa. So an extremely accomplished Black woman activist who has been present for so much in this country. Like Lynn Jones, Dr. Lynn Jones is living history. And what she's done is created a community land trust for the Black land in Truro. And I think we should be thinking about this kind of stuff as a solution to home ownership. So what we do is collectively pool the land. And this begins, actually, this is Black people stuff. The first land trusts were in Georgia, and it was the Black community. And it was to protect and promote land ownership within the Black community. So people who have more land donate their land. And so we collectively, instead of having one person with a huge yard and one person with no homes, we all put our land together and then collectively develop it. So we could build affordable housing on our own land. We can build businesses that don't have to pay, rent into the white community on our own land. And then that wealth can be going back into our land trust to promote community. We could build our own schools on our land. We control the land, and then therefore we control what's on it, and it's collectively owned. So it establishes the community. We're bringing our wealth and expertise together. And then we won't see our seniors selling off their land because, some shark is conning them, because the community holds the land. And then the land can't go to white people when our land becomes desirable, because it goes back to the community, and then we get to collectively assign it. So these are the kind of solutions that we really need to be thinking about, that aren't just like, let's Trudeau give us loans that we're going to have to pay back, right? That we have wealth in our community. We have land. We have all kinds of things. And like Black people also do need to, and where I will agree is not that like, racism doesn't exist, but we also need to stop internalizing that and believe that we're always the most wretched, the most deprived, the least powerful.
Absolutely.
Everybody else can do things. Look at the Chinese, and we don't need to say that. We can look at us. Look at us. Look at how we have created so much and innovated so much. Look at our expertise. And the problem is, as we talk about all the time, is our expertise flows outwards. All of our wealth, all of our intellect, everything we create goes to benefit everybody else except us. So our solution is to start putting that into community. So to say in a positive way, those kind of solutions from our elders, from our history, we can do these things. And we really need to start thinking about these kind of solutions. So shout out to Lynn Jones for her work doing, I think it's the second land trust in Nova Scotia. Hammonds Plains also has one. And I hope that Black people, especially if you're in a rural community, you can pool your land and we can really use it. So these are just some of the solutions. And I just wanted to say that as well. Yeah.
I'll just jump in really quickly. There's a request in the comments. Can you provide more info on the land trust? Do you have any more information on that?
Yeah, well, you could perhaps have Dr. Lynn Jones on to speak about it, because she's telling me all about it. Yes,
let's bring her on. Anyway we can, please.
Yeah, basically she got funding to actually, and then you you actually establish a trust, right? So it's a legal entity that's owned by the community, and then it's administered. So there's people that now she's hired, Black people, that then evaluate the land, look at it, and then you can economically survey your own land in your own community. And she's also working with the Indigenous community to also have that blessing, because we know that this is also Indigenous land, and work together. And it's completely, if we can think this way, we can reshape our own power and our own base and our own money, right? So you should have, I'll give you Lynn's contact, and you should
please do.
Dr. Vibe, you interviewed a lady that purchased 100 acres of land.
There's a couple, there's a couple
right.
in Southern Ontario that have brought 100 acres of land in the Niagara Peninsula area in Southern Ontario.
Right, so it's a similar concept, Elle, I believe, where you can buy into the company that owns the land, almost like a co-op, and benefit from whatever development. So I'm not sure what they're doing with that land. Are they going to develop it into
homes? In fact, I've got to get them on Black Canada Talking to chat about that, because we need to hear from those people what they are doing, because they need to get that message out there so we can put it out there. The only other thing I'm going to add is that when it comes to wealth, and I've said this a few times before, the greatest form of wealth in Blacks is the family. The Black family is the home of all wealth. So if we don't got our families right, we're not going to get our wealth right. Roger, go ahead. Roger or Cesar.
I just want to add, and Sister Elle was talking, she's absolutely correct in terms of ultimately, yes, there is a matter of looking at us in terms of kind of like FUBU, for us by us, because the problem, but as well the solution is within us. Whether we talk about the brain drain of Black intellectuals, not just Africans, but even when we look in terms of the Caribbean, but even in Black communities, just as even we talk about the average Black person. So, example, the average African risking his life in the Mediterranean to come to Europe that has been sold to him as a paradise. He's leaving his land where in the basement of the land, whites, Asians, especially Chinese, are looking at resources to develop their own. So we do have all this wealth within us, in our land. We have all this potential. We don't have to just be successful in entertainment, and to make it worse, we're not even the ones who control entertainment.
There you go.
As I
So
mentioned earlier, yeah.
we have all of this in us, but as I was saying in terms of criticizing the article, it starts with that Black consciousness. It starts with that sense of, as Dr. Vibe said, it starts in the family. It starts in the home. I mean, I'll have to remember next year I will show you some of the books for my daughter. She's not even 1 year old, but books about Black consciousness, about image, etc., etc., that basically make it that we can have Black children will become Black youth and Black adults who are Black centric in their identity, who are Pan-Africanist, and will basically understand it's not just about having money. It's about having money with a sense of identity and purpose to create intergenerationally.
Right. Not all money is good money. I'll just put it there.
And shout out to Sarah, who's
Yeah.
says all forms of
Forms of
family,
family,
including the
including
involuntary, voluntarily unmarried, and childless. I think that's really important.
Absolutely.
That
Absolutely.
we have long histories in the Black community of building other mothering, other families, and we've always had a strong definition of family that also includes our grandparents, that also includes them anyway. So yeah, shout out Sarah.
Well, yeah, I said when I say Black family, I don't mean the Eurocentric, Judeo-Christian, Semitic family sense. It's Black family. The house is open. Your family.
Well,
Only the walls are white, as I remind
Can
you.
I switch us topics really very quickly?
well,
Very
you and Cesar quick, and Roger, we still haven't got to a topic that you wanted to get to from
yeah,
day
sorry.
one.
No, we're fine. We're good.
Okay, all right. Go
No,
ahead.
it's only
Elle.
because we were talking about Black women. Has anybody seen these clips of Viola Davis's performance of Michelle Obama?
No.
No.
What is going on?
I saw one, but I didn't understand something about the first ladies, right? Is that
Yeah,
it?
so there's this show on, it's looking at
Yeah.
first ladies. So it's a series. And Viola Davis, who's obviously an excellent actor, I think she's the most awarded Black actor in history with awards like Oscars and stuff. But she made the extremely strange decision to I think she's trying to do Michelle Obama's mouth, but she plays the role like this the whole time. And there's these clips on, and it's brutal. It looks like a parody. And then
Oh,
she
wow.
has First
sure it
Lady
wasn't
Michelle
SNL?
Obama calling her husband an N-word. And it's
Yeah.
Michelle Obama wouldn't do that. Michelle
don't know.
Obama never uttered those words. Michelle
don't know.
Obama is
We don't know.
classy, refined, but she said herself that she doesn't curse because when she was a kid, she didn't win best camper, I guess, because she cursed, and she made a promise to it's just very strange. I just wanted to raise it because it's setting Black female Twitter alight in particular, because people are what is going on with this performance? What is happening? So okay,
let me give a perspective. I haven't seen it. I just saw a quick advertising on CNN, something first ladies, and I saw Viola Davis as Michelle Obama. I haven't seen the part. It was I don't think I even saw 10 seconds, but
I think she was trying to method act and take her mannerisms, but the whole point of acting isn't an imitation. You take the essence and you kind of do your own version, right?
so
I'm seeing somebody in the chat, David Click Cox, who worked with Ian on the Breaking Down Racial Boundaries.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
And I'd love to know, how far he thinks those pledges have gone as well. Kind of similar to what BNI did, because they did get a lot. I would say almost every major music
Label.
not the label, but the industry.
Industry, yeah.
You're right to sign this thing that they're gonna do something about the inequities and anti-black racism. So I think you should have him on to see where that project.
Him and Ian.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the both
Yeah,
of them.
I'm gonna reach. I'll reach out to both. David has been on before. I remember he was down by the beachfront in Toronto, but I'll see if I can get David and Ian on to see where things stand now. So I will definitely do that.
Really worked. Working a lot, man. Okay. He says we are done.
Oh, okay.
That's positive, or
yeah, we don't know about that. But Cesar, you wanted to say something about Michelle Obama, and you also wanted to close out with the election. Down. Yes, David Clickclaw saying down. Okay, David, I'm reaching out to you and Ian.
Good. No, I just wanted to say
we're down. Okay.
I just wanted to very quickly say today was election day in France, and President Emmanuel Macron, the ultra-liberalist president, won against right-winger Marine Le Pen. Basically, round 2 and the third straight loss for the right wing. However, what is very interesting in this election is that Marine Le Pen, a white woman from a very white and we can truly say racist family, got her highest scores from the French Caribbean islands here in the Americas, such as Guadeloupe, Martinique, etc. And, obviously those black people did not vote for her because she's racist, but, it's kind of fed up of the system, because we have to remember when we talk about Guadeloupe, Martinique, and those French Caribbean islands, they are still under colonization. They are not free. To give you a very concrete example, everything we talk about inflation and the rising cost of living, it is the norm over there for years. Everything over there costs that much more than in Paris. And of course, you have systemic racism, and you have, I invite everyone to discover this, the béquet. We were talking about land. The landowners, the richest people in those islands are called the béquet, B-E-K-E. What do they have in particular? Those are the descendants of the white slave masters, the minority, but they're the ones who have the wealth, the concentrated wealth, and you can absolutely imagine the nature of the way it's run. And very quickly, before people think all the black people who are there are descendants of slaves, many of them are also descendants of Africans, as during colonization, France took Africans to work kind of as, borderline indentured servants, let's call it that way, in those islands and in French Guyana in the late 19th century and early mid 20th century. So it's an interesting contrast to see that.
All right. Well, we are done. We could go on for longer, but just going to say another epic conversation. I'd like to say thanks to everyone who watches live, from Marlon to Back Business Live, to Dr. Tachi from Florida, to Sylvia Paris. Thank you, Sylvia, for dropping by. Sarah Yongo, David Click Cox. I'm coming after you and Ian Espinay, so get ready, get ready, get ready. Sarah saying the standard of living for the black masses in the Dom Tom is terrible. Those black Le Pen supporters might also harbor anti-immigrant sentiment. Good point.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
All right. So before we let everyone go, I'd like to say thank you and give contact information. First up, Elle Jones, TED Talk ×5 today.
And also Dr. Vibe, I also just really want to thank you for hosting this space, because we know that we don't, it's very hard in the Black community to talk about issues in a real way, right? And you get backlash when you do that. So I think it's actually important to hold space. We have disagreements among each other. We're not always on the same page. Sure. And I think that's actually important for us to publicly have those conversations without it being, it's not malicious, it's not harmful. It's actually good for Black people to debate. And obviously people can disagree, but I just think that's important to say, because sometimes when we start talking about these issues, it reads as why are you bashing people? Why are you this? And it's not. These are actually really important political issues. And ultimately, of course, they're informed by the state and white supremacy. It's not coming from us. And we also have to keep that in mind. So we have to notice and critique so that we can get out from under that, right? But I just wanted to say that because I think you do a courageous thing in hosting these spaces.
Well, thank you. I always wanted to create a safe and brave space for people who look like me. Some of them may not think like me, but I want to make sure that to show that there's many forms of Black. And I want everyone to come on here to have a safe and brave space. By the way, David's saying thank you and look forward to meeting Elle Jones in a couple of weeks to talk about
you're coming to Fredericton.
They're coming to the East Coast.
Yeah, okay.
So definite. And so, David, if you want Elle's contact information, reach out to me and I will get it to you. Next up, Cesar, any final words on where you can be contacted?
I'm back on Facebook. My 1 month plan is done. I promise I will no longer post about animal rights. I learned my lesson. I tried, but no, honestly, I'm there on Facebook, Cesar, Cesar Remy, Rimy. And as I was saying earlier, shout out to my mentees from I'm not going to say their names, but the mid-20s in Halifax in medicine school to the one in his mid-30s in Paris, basically struggling, but always rising in terms of, trying to make it happen. So about all 10 of them, many of them are listening right now, of my mentees, I give them props.
Thank you. And Roger, I hope we have you back because we still have that one conversation topic.
There's more coming, man.
Okay, all right.
But I really am hopeful. I love to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I think that everybody has a heart. I mean, you don't start this nonprofit organization and put a playbook and trying to do something good. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I hope Wes is somewhat like what Prince did. I just love that. When Prince died, we found out how many people he had helped just quietly.
Mm-hmm.
Like he sent kids to school. There's a ton of stuff. So, Wes, maybe I'm hoping that that's what you're doing, right? You're investing in some Black companies under the quiet because you don't want everybody to flood you for the money. I'm really hoping that's what you're doing, right? But you know what? We'll eventually get to the nonprofit conversation. People can find me on LinkedIn. It's the best place. That's the best place.
Yeah, but you and your wonderful, wonderful, beautiful wife run
BuyBlacks.com,
which is
it's the top online magazine that focuses exclusively on telling Black Canadian stories, not African stories, not Caribbean stories, but Black Canadian stories, 100% pure.
All right. Thank you all, because you're all smarter than me, and I'm glad to be in your space anytime you give me an inch or give me a centimeter. So I appreciate it. It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association, and I host the only online conversation in the world for dads and fathers. It's sponsored by Dove Men Care. It's also co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. Also, if you want to catch me, you always can catch me here 5 p.m. on Sundays. Monday and Friday mornings, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, I host the Morning Vibe with Ryan Knight, who is the, executive director of the Afro-Caribbean Business Network. And then on Saturday nights, you can catch it with Aisha K. Staggers and Jill Jones, where they're dropping knowledge bombs and other type of bombs, verbal bombs on State of Things. So look forward to you joining, and follow the doctor on YouTube so you'll get notified for more of these epic conversations. So as always, I close out with this: live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Also, big thanks to BIA Media for producing another epic Black Canada Talking. And 2 last things: remember to give yourselves grace, and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. We'll see you on the digital road. God bless, peace, well, and keep the faith.